Well, it's been a day of high drama in the Indian IT industry. L&T has pressed on the pedal to mount a hostile acquisition of Mindtree against the wishes of the Mindtree promoters. L&T has completed the first step of what is likely to be a three-part takeover. It's bought over 20% stake from the founder of Cafe Coffee Day and an early investor in Mindtree, VG Siddhartha. L&T plans to take its shareholding over 66% through an open offer and open market purchases. This was announced late last night. Now today, the L&T top brass held a press conference to justify its decision. L&T has maintained that there is no hostility and they're doing this straight from the heart. In fact, they've also left the doors open to negotiate with Mindtree's promoters. But the Mindtree promoters are in no mood to budge. At a press conference this afternoon, they hit back at L&T, calling the hostile takeover attempt as a grave threat and one that could lead to value destruction. Mindtree promoters claim that they're hopeful of getting support from domestic and institutional investors. Let's take a look at the back and forth between the top managements of L&T and Mindtree.
Obviously, when a promoter founders over a period of time find that one of the important promoters or initial investors moves out and wants to place his stakeholding in another house or in another matter, there are certain emotionalities and trepidations involved. That's visible as we see it. But business is business. Emotions do play a part, but emotionalities have to be overcome as we go forward.
You have chosen to mount the first ever hostile takeover in the 50-year-old unblemished Indian IT industry. If you persist in what you are doing, you will forever be remembered for this. Is this how you want to set an example?
What we are trying to do is with, if I can use the word, Pyaar. And we will continue to look at it as something which we are doing from our dil. And we would like and intend to take it forward in the same manner and purpose.
This is a people business. Mindtree minds have signed up for a mission, not just a salary. Take their mission away and they will go. What will you be left with?
Well, the top managements there of L&T and Mindtree. L&T making it clear that this is an offer that Mindtree should not refuse because they believe that this is going to be the best fit for the company going forward. In fact, A.M. Naik, speaking to us earlier today, said that, look, we're better than a private equity coming on board. We are also a people-oriented business. Well, that's where this leaves things today. Before I bring the experts on the takeover tussle, let me go across to my colleagues Nisha Poddar, who was at the L&T press meet. Nisha, let me start by asking you, the L&T management making it clear that they intend to go through with this, that they're absolutely confident of being able to pull this transaction together despite the hurdles and the challenges that they face given the Mindtree founders' opposition.
As the takeover tussle for Mindtree really carries on and there is more opposition and pushback coming in from the promoters of Mindtree, the tone that Larsen & Toubro management took today was more pacificatory in nature. In fact, talking and giving more importance to the emotional quotient of the promoters, and that also assuring that there is room for further negotiation with the Mindtree promoters. As far as the business sense goes, for Larsen & Toubro, they have clearly stated that they will be looking at diversifying and de-risking from the EPC business, and therefore the focus on the IT services really comes into the picture. As far as Mindtree is concerned, they are looking at independently running this company. At a future date, an integration with L&T Infotech may or may not be there. It will be on the basis of the shareholders' value and also the profitability of each of the companies. But at the moment, the strategy is to let Mindtree really operate independently. And also, one of the points stated was that L&T Infotech as well as Mindtree are complementary in nature and have very few overlaps. So it strengthens the group when it comes to the IT sector. On the other hand, for Larsen & Toubro, as far as paying back to its own shareholders are concerned, and the cash component of over 10,000 crore rupees that could go in this acquisition, well, on that front, they did state that ROE, or the return on equity, is neutral as far as this transaction is concerned. In a few years, it can even double. But the key question condition definitely will be the participation coming in from the minority shareholders to the open offer as well as to the open market transactions that Larsen & Toubro will be doing to up the stake from 20% to 66%. And that will be the key to see, because whether they will be a financial investor or a strategic investor with control and board seat will be something which will define L&T's strategy in this particular space. But we did speak to A.M. Nayak earlier, and he said that only 4 to 5% of the shareholders are likely to really tender in their shares through the open offer.
All right, Nisha, thanks very much for distilling for us the commentary that came in from the L&T management. And speaking of the L&T management, here's the big man, A.M. Nayak, on why he believes that this is the right way forward for Mindtree.
We have been hearing for last 3 years that now the many promoters want to exit. And instead of private equity and other investor taking, company of L&T reputation, who knows how to run IT business, because we have already, and we are good to employees always, which is our very, very strong principle. It is good for both the companies. I can't understand what is hostility in that. Somebody or the other is going to take the company. No, not in near future. Both has a separate shareholder. Both has a separate customer. It will run, both the companies will run separately. It will be hopefully someday, when the promoter want to exit on their own, at that stage we will think what to do.
Well, that's A.M. Nayak there. Mugdha Warrior at the press meet held by Mindtree's top brass in Bengaluru. Mugdha, Mindtree's promoters speaking out once again, but do they have a strategy on how they intend to stop L&T? Do they have the support, for instance, of institutional investors?
The Mindtree promoters came out to make a statement today, just less than 24 hours after L&T, initiated a hostile takeover of the company after signing an agreement with VG Siddhartha to buy out his entire 20.32% stake in the company. And, Rostov Ravanan, K.K. Natarajan and Subrata Bagchi came together to reiterate that this is a hostile takeover that will be value destructive to the company and that there will be no strategic advantage from this transaction. They also posed some 5 very pointed questions to L&T, which revolved around why L&T was not using its own resources to build its own technology, and what they would do if customers take their business elsewhere, and if the Mindtree employees also choose to exit. And lastly, they also posed a question to L&T saying, would they want to be remembered as a company that does not respect entrepreneurship or the Startup India movement. But more importantly, remember that L&T management today in Mumbai during their press conference had said that the Mindtree management had approached them a few years ago, but that deal didn't go through. But today, the Mindtree promoters say that it was Mindtree which rejected their offer 4 years ago. And, there was also talk about the institutional investors and domestic investors in Mindtree. And the promoters reiterated that, they have the support from many of these investors. They also mentioned Nalanda, which is an institutional investor. And they said that, they have heard from several of their employees and clients and customers who say that they stand with the management against this hostile takeover. But there was no clear indication of what steps the Mindtree management will take if this deal goes through, where L&T has proposed an open offer to take its stake up to 66%. So I think the questions will be answered after the board meeting tomorrow that Mindtree will have, where they're also considering a share buyback, which is unlikely to go through because they will now need a 75% shareholder approval following L&T's public announcement of the takeover of Siddhartha's stake.
All right, Mugdha, thanks very much for joining us. So watch out for the Mindtree board meet tomorrow. Now, joining us now to discuss this corporate battle, Sriram Subramaniam, the founder of InGovern, G. Chokalingam, the founder of Economics Research, and Urmil Shah, the Associate Vice President and Research Analyst at IDBI Capital. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program. Sriram, let me start by asking you, and there is obviously a lot of emotions involved here, but let's separate the emotion from the business strategy and from the business imperative. Let's let's start by talking about VG Siddhartha. He's been one of the oldest investors in Mindtree, one of the, out of the three that had first invested in Mindtree, he's the only one that's left. He has 20% stake in the company. He's been wanting to exit. If he goes to L&T, if they offer him a better price and decides to exit, what's wrong with the choice that he's making?
Definitely. I think if you look at it very objectively, Siddhartha has seed-funded Mindtree. He has been with the founders for almost 20 years now. He has been a white knight when Ashok Soota sold his shares, and he has bought those shares. So he has shown a lot of confidence in the management and the founders of Mindtree for over 20 years. And now when he is in dire need, he has chosen to sell, and he has engaged with the founders. It's not that he sold surreptitiously. He has engaged with the founders, with the management, and sold it at a price which he believes is right. And to a buyer, I think, who is not a corporate trader in the genuine sense of corporate trader, who still has capability, execution capability, who has their skin in the game in that sense of even in the IT services industry.
Okay, let me take that point forward. And no one can argue with the fact that VG Siddhartha wants an exit, and he deserves an exit. He's been a patient investor for over 20 years. Mr. Chokkalingam, let me put that question to you. The argument that's being presented by the Mindtree founders is that this is a hostile takeover. It's the first hostile takeover in the history of the Indian IT services business. And is this the kind of legacy that L&T wants to be remembered for, and so on and so forth? But are those the right questions, or should the question really be whether this deal is going to be value destructive as far as the company involved is concerned, and for minority shareholders? Does it offer any strategic advantage, or does it destroy value going forward? So are we getting confused between emotion and what the business imperatives are? And is it fair to paint L&T as the sort of corporate trader or corporate raider, as it were?
Yeah, there are two perspectives in our question. To take it up first, it's a purely emotional issue for Mindtree promoters. One can understand, the way they have nurtured. But, the capitalist path of development the country has adopted, and stock market also purely governed by the market principles rather than socialist principles. So therefore, to call this, not proper, I don't think is a right allegation. And secondly, saying that it will be value destruction, that I don't agree, because the promoters who have a 13.3% stake, that is also worth about 2,000 crore, and it is a people business. So in case they believe in value destruction, they are also party to lose a lot of money. And therefore, I don't believe that they can choose that path of value destruction, because they will also lose by same proportion. So therefore, I believe that all these issues would be sorted out. L&T would become ultimately a winner in the game.
Okay, you believe that L&T will be the winner in this game. Let me go across to Urmil. Urmil, what does this mean as far as minority shareholders are concerned? This is going to be a three-step process as L&T embarks on taking this decision forward. One, of course, is the share purchase agreement, which has already been inked at 980 rupees per share with VG Siddhartha. Then it's the open offer, and then the open market purchases. What does it mean for minority shareholders, given the fact that at this point in time, what we've heard from the L&T management is that they will allow Mindtree to operate independently, that sometime in the future, perhaps, there will be a merger of L&T Infotech and Mindtree, but that is not being explored at this point in time. For now, what does it mean for minority?
Clearly there is a disconnect as regards the view of how L&T wants to allow Mindtree to operate independently, and the expectations of the founders and the current senior management of Mindtree. So, such kind of disconnect is never good for minority shareholders. We actually believe that what we discussed yesterday on your channel is that the deal which L&T had announced at 980 rupees and allowing such a significant chunk of stake changing hands without impacting the stock to a great extent, in fact was good from a minority shareholders point of view. Also, they wanting to buy 15% stake from open market also is actually good for minority shareholders. But we believe the disconnect is where it does not work out well for the minority shareholders right now.
You know, you're absolutely right. And let me take that point forward with both Sriram Subramaniam as well as Mr. Chokalingam. The disconnect that Urmil is talking about, and I think the Mindtree founders have made it evidently clear that, look, you know, there is likely to be large-scale attrition. There will perhaps be an exodus if this transaction were to go through. I mean, this is a people business. Given that, you know, will it not then result in value destruction, Sriram? Should this not be something that the L&T board, I'm sure, would have factored in? But should this not be given much more weight?
Having previously worked in the IT services industry, I can tell that it would client flight would be a serious risk had the corporate trader been some unknown entity. But in this case, L&T is a large Indian corporate, has a successful IT services business, has financial metrics which are comparable, if not better than that of Mindtree. I'm talking about L&T Infotech's financial metrics. So from all these perspectives, clients would not disappear overnight. And I would think that L&T has also demonstrated professionalism in the way they have gone about this. And so from that perspective, I don't see clients flying away or clients leaving. Even employees for that matter, though there's a lot of emotion now, come a change in management. I foresee a change in management once and change in the board over the next couple of months. I think employees will then objectively look at it and continue to stay with the company.
Okay, you see a change in management as well as a change in board. But Mr. Chokalingam, coming back to you, what we heard from L&T today is that, look, we're willing to negotiate with the founders of Mindtree. Where can this actually head? There is a question mark on whether institutional support will be in favor of Mindtree founders. They seem to believe that that is going to be the case. But even if that were to be the case, what will it mean as far as this transaction is concerned?
First of all, I don't think the promoters would get a support of majority of the institutional investors. You know, as other gentleman has rightly put it, you know, L&T is a conglomerate. It is also known for a good corporate governance. And third, most important point is that if this deal had happened 10 years ago, retaining employees in the IT sector would have been difficult. Today, the whole industry is growing at 2 to 4% in dollar term, the export revenue. And it's a very tough situation to aspire a substantial hike in the jobs, you know, in terms of compensation. So I don't think the employee attrition would be very high. So ultimately, considering the L&T name, governance, you know, the platform they have and cash holding, finally, I think the majority of the institutional investors also would play in tune with L&T and make the overall transition quite smooth. That's my strong view.
Urmil, you know, what are the options before the Mindtree founders at this point in time? The board is meeting tomorrow. The possibility of this buyback acting as some sort of hurdle for this transaction to go through. I mean, what are we talking about in terms of options for the Mindtree founders to be able to block this particular deal?
Right. So, so the only option which I think is there with Mindtree right now is to have a backing of a large financial investor because clearly the transaction between Mr. Siddhartha and L&T that needs to have should go ahead. So the balance part of the transaction is where Mindtree can basically try and have some roadblocks. But for that, they will need to have a strong financial backing, which I would say at 980 rupees, it's at 16 times on FY21 earnings. So I don't think a large PE investor would want to come in at that valuation, and at a time when there is a disconnect between the two parties.
You're right on that front, because a private equity investor could have come in before. It's no secret that Vijit Siddhartha has been on the lookout to bring an investor on board to find himself an exit out of Mindtree. And Mindtree's founders have also not been able to find that large financial investor that Urmil was talking about. So I don't know how they will be able to come up with somebody at this juncture. But Mr. Chokalingam, coming back to you, and really now let's talk about the future, because while L&T so far maintains that these two entities, L&T Infotech and Mindtree, will run independently, to quote Mr. Naik, sometime hopefully in the future there is likely to be a merger. What is your best estimate in terms of how quickly we could perhaps see that happen, and what could be the synergies that will accrue on account of it?
Yeah, it is very obvious that maybe after 6 months or 1 year they would think of merger. Obviously, at this point in time, we can't expect them to openly admit that, because it doesn't make sense to run three entities differently. And the advantage is that a combination of all three entities would give you about 21,000 crore of revenue, which will make this company as the sixth largest company in the IT space. And therefore, they can even aspire to become, much bigger than the 21,000 crore. And and it makes a lot of sense. The cost saving will be enormous, because you don't have to duplicate the administration across three verticals. And also even the marketing network can be streamlined. That also can save you a lot of money. So it will be a win-win situation, whenever they do the consolidation. But eventually it would happen. I don't think it makes any sense at all to run these three entities differently.
You're right on that. That is the assumption. But as and when this happens, the timing of it is a question at this point in time. Urmil, what's the call on the stocks?
Uncertainty on both the parties is clearly does not augur well with Mindtree. I would say that that's not good for the stock. And on L&T Infotech, I think it is positive on both the fronts. So whether this deal goes ahead or it does not go ahead, because if the deal goes ahead, L&T is clear that at least for the foreseeable future, which we believe should be at least couple of years, till the matrix on both the consistency of revenue growth as well as the profitability of Mindtree is brought near to what LTI does. And on if this deal does not actually go through for whatever reasons, still LTI would continue to do well on its own. So I believe right now it's slightly negative for Mindtree and it's positive for L&T Infotech.
Positive for L&T Infotech, Mindtree closing lower by about 2%. Sriram, I'll give you the final comments. Given the fact that L&T has tried to sort of make conciliatory overtures today, saying that we're operating Dil Se, and this is about Pyaar, it's not about hostility. Mindtree, of course, rebuffing those gestures altogether. But what would be in the best interest of the company? I mean, this is a company that the Mindtree founders have been running with a lot of love, passion, and L&T wants to hopefully take that forward as well. So what would be the best scenario now for both parties?
The best case scenario, which currently is not, doesn't seem to be on the table, is of course L&T to regard this as an investment and hold about 35%, which is what they will minimum hope to achieve, and then continue to get the promoters or the founders of Mindtree to run the company as is. That's a best case scenario. But right now, the amount of hostility shown by, in fact, the founders of Mindtree seems to could brush L&T the wrong way, so which would be unfortunate.
Well, it aspires to be a strategic investor. So will it settle with just being a financial investor? If it were to boil down to that, that's the big question. But of course, we probably are going to see both sides negotiate. Remember, there's a crucial Mindtree board meeting tomorrow. But so far, they have rebuffed the overtures being made by the L&T management. This is a developing story. We'll keep you updated. But for this evening, G. Chokalingam, Sriram Subramaniam and Urmil Shah, many thanks for joining us on the many developments and twists and turns in the L&T-Mindtree takeover tussle.